In April 2022, Nancy Brophy, a self-published romance novelist and insurance agent, found herself on trial for the murder of her husband, Daniel Brophy. The shocking incident took place in June 2018 when Daniel was fatally shot in the kitchen of the culinary school where he taught. Nancy's arrest sent shockwaves through their community, as they were known for their strong and loving 25-year marriage. During the investigation, surveillance footage raised doubts about Nancy's alibi. The discovery of a gun kit, which she claimed was for literary research, and an article she had written titled "How to Murder Your Husband" added to the mounting evidence against her. Let's delve deeper into this intriguing case. On the fateful morning of June 2nd, 2018, students at the Oregon Culinary Institute arrived for their usual classes, only to find the entrance door locked. Eventually, an instructor let them in through the student entrance, but something felt amiss. As a small group of students made their way to the back kitchen, where Chef Daniel Brophy should have been preparing for the day, they were met with a horrifying sight. Their beloved teacher lay lifeless on the floor. The students thought it might be a medical emergency and began performing CPR while one student dialed 911.
911.
Hi, we are at Oregon Culinary Institute, and there is somebody collapsed in one of our kitchens.
Okay, just a moment.
And he's one of our chefs, and he's an older man.
All right, is he conscious right now?
No, he is not conscious.
Okay, is he breathing?
No, he is not breathing.
Okay. And is anyone doing CPR?
Yes. Okay, he's bleeding out of what? Okay, he's bleeding out of his chest.
Bleeding out of his chest? Okay, they'll be there. They're coming really fast. They'll be there any second.
They're going to be there any second.
Shocked and bewildered, more students and a fellow chef gathered, desperately trying to make sense of the tragedy unfolding before them. Within minutes, paramedics and firefighters arrived at the scene. It was then that they made a chilling discovery. Daniel Brophy had been shot. Shell casings littered the kitchen floor, indicating a deliberate act of violence. The beloved chef had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the back.
At this point, we don't have any suspect information. The medical examiner, homicide detectives, and our forensics folks are here beginning to process the scene. And based on the preliminary information, we are looking at this as a homicide.
Surprisingly, the Culinary Institute lacked any security measures. No fingerprints were found on the shell casings. This was not an uncommon occurrence. Furthermore, no weapon was recovered from the crime scene. Upon hearing about the shooting at the OCI, Daniel's wife Nancy rushed to the Culinary Institute. During the recorded conversation, Nancy engaged in a 10-minute discussion with the detectives before finally inquiring about her husband's well-being. It took several more minutes for her to ask about the details of the incident. Finally, after 47 minutes into the call, she questioned the whereabouts of her husband, Daniel Brophy.
So I'm Detective Posey, and we're here also with Detective Merrill, and we're here with Nancy. And your last name, Nancy?
Brophy.
Okay. And today's date is June 2nd, 2018, and it's approximately, 10:47.
We did a culinary tour of Oaxaca. This must have been 2003. And we did this culinary tour, and we were with these same people for 13 days. And at the end of the 13 days, I don't notice he's quiet, but somebody said, "You know, I didn't think your husband ever spoke." And I thought, he talks all the time. But they didn't see it that way. And so here's the other thing. He doesn't harbor grudges. I mean, he truly doesn't harbor grudges. When he first went to work at Western Culinary, God, I'm going to have to tell you stories here.
There's not any specific, things that you know about that.
Right.
There's no, like he was like, "Oh man, this person's really got it out for me," or
No.
none of that kind of.
And that wouldn't be how he thought anyway.
Okay.
Dan kind of is his own little world. God, that makes him sound incompetent. He's not. He's not.
No, I know. So I just want to let you know that, we believe, Dan, we believe it's Dan that's been killed. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of got that
I
when
kinda figured
everybody
you
gave
would,
me the
yeah.
sad sack look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's our job to figure out what happened. Kids,
That's Nathaniel.
Nathaniel, and that's the only kid that
And that's-
he has through her.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Any issues there?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, no, Nathaniel's
Did
great.
you guys have any? Yeah, we're just trying to figure out what, and that's why I'm asking
Sure.
some of these kind of questions.
Can you
and
tell me
stuff.
what happened, as far as you know?
He was shot.
With an AR-15?
No, I don't know what he was shot with.
Oh,
But he was shot with a gun. Why do you say AR-15?
because school shootings are all
Oh, no.
AR-15s now.
At the Institute, Nancy described Daniel's routine and said her husband followed his usual routine of tending to the chickens and walking their dogs early in the morning. She mentioned that she woke up when he came upstairs to take a shower. Nancy estimated that he left for work slightly after 7 a.m. Officers at the scene witnessed Nancy breaking down in tears. They made sure the 68-year-old widow got home safely. The detective drove her home in her 2005 Toyota Sienna minivan that morning. Nancy Brophy appeared to be in distress and overwhelmed by the morning's events. Although the death was ruled a homicide, and the unassuming widow was not considered suspicious. On the morning of the murder, her hands were not tested for gun residue. She claimed she was at home until she received a call about the shooting at the Institute. However, detectives' perceptions of Nancy began to change when external security footage from the Culinary Institute surfaced. While the OCI itself lacked cameras, a nearby pizza place had footage showing a snapshot of the street outside. A striking image from the video revealed an old Toyota minivan similar to Nancy's, parked outside the Institute just minutes before Dan was shot and killed. Investigators started gathering external surveillance footage from around the Institute that morning. Dan was seen arriving at work at 7:20 a.m., and the building's alarm was disarmed at 7:22 a.m., indicating he was likely inside. Based on the circumstances of his discovery, it was assumed he was attacked while filling ice buckets in the back sink. In the early hours of the morning, at precisely 6:39 a.m., a van resembling Nancy's appeared on the security footage. The woman behind the wheel bore a striking resemblance to Nancy herself. The van made a deliberate turn towards the street where the Institute was located, raising suspicions. Fast forward to 7:20 a.m., and there it was again, the van suspected to be Nancy's, arriving at her workplace. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. At 7:08 a.m., the van was captured entering the premises of the Institute. Just 20 minutes later, at 7:28 a.m., it was seen leaving the area. The van's side bore a marking eerily similar to Nancy's own vehicle. If Nancy was indeed waiting for her husband's arrival at work, and if she had committed the unthinkable act of shooting him, she certainly did it with efficiency. Parking her van, slipping into the building after Dan had disarmed the alarm, carrying out the crime, and then making her escape within a mere 6 minutes. But why would Nancy want to kill Dan? Nancy and Dan's love story began in the early 1990s, when Nancy made the life-changing decision to move to Portland. While Dan continued his work at the prestigious Oregon Culinary Institute as a beloved mentor to the aspiring chefs of the next generation, Nancy dabbled in various jobs to make ends meet. From selling life insurance to writing captivating romance novels, she had a knack for versatility. Her self-published series, The Wrong Series, blended romance with mystery, featuring intriguing titles like The Wrong Hero, The Wrong Cop, and most notably, The Wrong Husband. In this specific topic, Nancy commented, "As a romantic suspense writer, I spend a lot of time thinking about murder and consequently about police procedure. After all, if the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. And let me say clearly for the record, I don't like jumpsuits, and orange isn't my color." In another post, Nancy delves into the art of covering one's tracks, carefully selecting the perfect moment to strike, and swiftly acquiring one's husband's life insurance policies after committing the crime. Her captivating writing explores the dark secrets of a murderous wife, revealing the cunning strategies she employs to escape conviction and savor the rewards of her sinister deeds. Husbands have disappeared from cruise ships before, so why not yours? Seriously? Dan had an abundance of life insurance policies, perhaps more than what would be considered necessary. The couple was spending nearly $1,000 each month on these policies, which seemed quite excessive given Dan's annual income of $34,000. However, Nancy seemed eager to assist in managing these policies. Surprisingly, shortly after Dan's murder, Nancy reached out to Detective Darren Posey, inquiring about a letter for her insurance provider that would absolve her of any suspicion in her husband's death. This letter would enable her to collect a substantial $40,000 from her life insurance policy.
But this may give you a laugh this afternoon. I don't want to be the stupid question of the day, but I think I need to be the stupid question of the day. So
Okay.
my insurance company said, well, just have the detective write a letter that you're no longer a suspect. And I said, man, I just don't know that he's there. And I'm not sure that he looks at it that way. But if you do, I get you to write the letter. My sister, when I told her this as a lawyer, laughed so hard she fell out of the chair. So
Why
because
why would you need that?
because they don't want to pay if it turns out that I secretly went down to the school and shot my husband because I thought, hey, going into old age without Dan after 25 years, it's really what I'm looking for, you know.
Okay. Well,
So,
we never would do something like that.
I really didn't think so.
Yeah, I mean that's not something that we never do something like that. That's never been done. I've never heard of that being done.
I was shocked when he told me this. And the other thing he says, well, I said, so what happens if, in fact, based upon your, and this is such a stupid little policy, I can't believe they're making me jump through the hoops like this. This is only $40,000. My sister said, you know, usually when they do that, it's for millions. And I said, yeah, we weren't sure for millions.
Subsequently, the police discovered that the amount of life insurance Nancy was entitled to receive far exceeded the $40,000 she had mentioned. This revelation raised suspicions and intensified the investigation. On September 5, 2018, Nancy was apprehended and charged with murder. Investigators attempted to interview her, but she promptly exercised her right to an attorney, declining any questioning. During the bond hearing, Nancy's fate seemed to be sealed as a preview of what was to come during the trial. The state meticulously laid out the evidence against her, making it clear they did not want her released. Ultimately, the bond was denied, and Nancy was left in custody, awaiting her trial. In April 2022, after numerous delays, Nancy finally faced trial. Prosecutors pointed to the minivan captured on external video footage outside the OCI, alleging it was Nancy. They claimed she entered the institute, shot her husband, and left without a trace.
She's not seen again on camera until 7:28. I believe the evidence will show you that she remained within this area during that time, between 7:08 and 7:28. Otherwise, she would have been caught on the various other cameras leaving the area.
The state emphasized the intricate layout of the building, suggesting it could have been confusing for someone unfamiliar. Nancy's familiarity with the location only added to the weight of evidence against her. The author's blog post titled "How to Kill Your Husband" was deemed inadmissible during the trial due to its irrelevance. The judge clarified that the post was written over a decade ago for a writing seminar, and its potential value to the case was overshadowed by the potential bias it could create among the jury. Moving on to the murder weapon, the prosecutors presented compelling evidence that Nancy Brophy had acquired a ghost gun kit specifically designed to create an unregistered firearm in the months leading up to the crime. The investigation uncovered internet search history on an older laptop found in Brophy's closet, revealing searches related to the weapon, registration procedures in Oregon, and local gun shows where such firearms could be obtained. On the 17th of February, Nancy purchased a Glock 17 at a gun show, followed by the creation of an eBay account just 2 days later. 3 days after that, on the 23rd, her online activity indicated the purchase of a slide and barrel assembly, which could potentially modify her gun. A ballistics expert testified about the discrepancy between the casings found at the crime scene and Nancy's gun. Prosecutors suggested that Nancy might have attached the modified slide and barrel to her gun after committing the murder, in an attempt to prevent investigators from linking the unique bullet markings to her firearm. Interestingly, when investigators received Nancy's gun, they discovered that the slide and barrel were not properly seated on the weapon. While Nancy's defense team argues that this fact holds no significance, It is undeniably peculiar considering the suspicion that the gun had been modified in that exact manner. Nancy's cell phone activity was monitored in conjunction with the surveillance footage showing a red van suspected to be hers near the OCI on the day of the murder. The suspect vehicle had a license plate number that matched Nancy's van. Nancy's defense centered around a powerful claim that challenged the state's accusations. According to her defense, Nancy and Dan Brophy had a strong and harmonious marriage that spanned 25 years, filled with love and collaboration until Dan's untimely demise. However, the state argued that Nancy had a motive to kill her husband due to financial struggles. They presented evidence showing that the couple was facing financial difficulties, with Dan having 6 active life insurance policies at the time of his death. Combined with workers' compensation, Nancy stood to gain around $1.6 million. The defense's forensic accountants, on the other hand, painted a different picture, describing the couple's financial situation as relatively stable and improving. They'd even received some financial support from Dan's family, and utilized their 401 retirement savings as a temporary solution to their immediate concerns. Nancy's defense team vehemently disagreed with the state's portrayal of the Brophy's financial state as near ruin, considering it an exaggeration and completely inaccurate. The defense team also made the argument that even if Nancy was indeed seen near the Culinary Institute in the minivan that day, it would have been impossible for her to commit the crime in just 6 minutes. They supported their case by using surveillance footage to piece together the evidence. Sergio Perez, the defense's assistant, highlighted a particular footage that showed a suspicious individual near the building around the time of Dan's murder. They closely monitored this person's movements before and after the crime took place. Interestingly, a man named Oscar Taylor, who was identified in the footage, disappeared from view for approximately 30 minutes shortly before 7:20 a.m.
So if Oscar Taylor would have continued going up 18th and, say, tried to get into the area of the school or the businesses on the left, you don't have any video of that?
No.
Okay. And could you tell what Oscar Taylor was doing with that can?
I suppose he was collecting stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it consistent with somebody that's picking up items, specifically cans that are worth money? Is that consistent with what he's doing?
Could be. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, if somebody told you that he was actually canning that morning, collecting cans to turn in for money, would that be consistent with what you were seeing on the video?
Possible. I don't know. I didn't see him doing that, so
Sure.
Yeah, I just had to.
But you're not seeing anything that's suggesting he's doing something else.
Oh, I don't know.
As the trial entered its 3rd week, the prosecution had already presented their case when they received unexpected information. A former inmate who had shared a jail dormitory with Nancy earlier in the year came forward with a story about a conversation they had. She revealed that Nancy had described the murder of her husband to her.
You know, I remember asking her if she could use the media to help find who killed her husband, you know, because I felt like that was important. If you had a platform, then you could use that platform to help, you know, find out who did this horrible thing to her husband. And she said she didn't have to prove who killed her husband. She just needed to worry about proving that she didn't. And she told me that he was shot 2 times to the heart. And and she showed me the distance. She said he was shot 2 times to the heart, and she said it was about, and she used her arm span, because I said, wow, must have been close up, you know, and she used her arm span and said, well, it was about this far, and that's...
Okay. So just to be clear, she held her arms out.
Correct.
Said it was about this far?
Correct.
Did she say anything about her involvement?
No. I mean, when we were first talking, she slipped up and she started to say I, but then she switched really quick to it. And so she was saying it was about this far. I mean, it was not You say, you know how you sometimes you start saying something, then you're like, oh, like that, you know.
After more than 20 days into the trial, Nancy Brophy decided to take the stand in her own defense. During her testimony, she focused on explaining her and Dan's financial situation, acknowledging that they had faced difficulties in the past, but insisting that it was all behind them. The verdict was delivered on May 25, 2022, declaring Nancy guilty of second-degree murder in the case of Daniel Brophy. Consequently, she was condemned to spend the rest of her life behind bars.